Steve, would you like to start us off on our presentation?
Sounds great, Kristin. So as you can see on the title page, Inclusive Insights Shaping the Future of Accessible Research is a presentation that Kristin and I are about to give. First, before we start, if you'd like to get in touch with us directly, there's a QR code that will take you to my LinkedIn page. Feel free to reach out, and I can then share Kristin's as well. So let's get into it. What is marketing research? So market research is a way to help businesses understand their consumers' needs and behaviors. And some of the traditional means of marketing research have not sought to include those with disabilities. So our goal is to make research inclusive so that every voice is heard. And in fact, we're part of AIC, which stands for the Accessibility Insights Consortium, and it's been created just to meet this end. So if you'd like more information about AIC or the Accessibility Insights Consortium, please feel free to reach out, because it's a research community where there are market research professionals, both on the supplier side, the vendor side, as well as on the stakeholder side or the client side. And we're all working together to make market research accessible. So I'm just going to start with some very basic things. Primary market research is basically broken down into three areas: qualitative, quantitative, and hybrid. Qualitative research would be focus groups, in-depth interviews. It tends to go a little bit deeper, get into people's emotional feelings about a product or a service, whereas quantitative would be surveys that can be online or via telephone. Yes, people still do telephone surveys, and even traditional mail surveys, but primarily online is the main methodology for quantitative research. And hybrid is a third means of which we conduct market research. And quali-quant methodology is becoming quite popular because it allows us basically to do both qualitative and quantitative in one swoop, as opposed to having to do two phases of research. So there are two lanes where accessibility plays a very key role. The first lane is what I'd like to refer to as screening and recruitment of our sample. That would be, for example, if we have a panel of people, we make sure that that panel is representative of those with disabilities, for example, or that we have an upfront screener where we're not screening out people because they might have a disability. And many times that happens by accident because our tools are not accessible. The second lane where accessibility plays a major role is in the implementation of the research. That would be, for example, you've been screened, you're part of the research process, you're now being redirected to an online survey, and you go to a survey platform to fill out the questions. We need to make sure that in that implementation phase, that survey platform is in fact accessible. So why does inclusivity in research matter? According to the CDC, and this is even data that's going back to 2022, over 28% of U.S. adults have a disability. Numbers, in fact, if we were to look at numbers today, they're even higher than that. That's a different conversation, but even dealing with the minimum number of over 28%, which, like I've said, is an understatement, there are still many non-apparent disabilities that are not being included, and I will touch on that in a bit. We're also talking about a market here of $1.9 trillion globally, so there's a great business case to be made that when we're being inclusive, we're also being very smart from a business perspective. And then finally, inclusive research leads to better insights and more representative data. There's nothing more discouraging for a client, and I've been on both the vendor and the client side, where you start to read a report, do the analysis of the data, and you realize that people are being left out. So now you have a situation where it's not a representative study and you need to go back to the drawing board. Inclusive research mitigates that. To recognize the understated realities of accessibility, there are adults with disabilities that are often understated. Primarily, I'm going to give three reasons why these data are understated. Number one, underreporting or non-apparent disabilities. Many of the federal surveys that are out there identify up to 43% of people who self-report as disabled, and sometimes that data can be incomplete. A second reason is episodic conditions. Health conditions are not constant. ADHD, PTSD, autoimmune diseases are often overlooked. And then third, long COVID is something that's emerged over the last few years, and that's become a major source of disability that affects roughly 11% of U.S. adults. And it also disproportionately impacts those that already have a disability. So recognizing and accommodating these realities can unlock untapped talent pools that drive workforce engagement and present promising business opportunities. So just think about your own business. And if I was to ask you the question, have you observed similar trends in your organization or research? I think that's a very interesting area for us to have a separate discussion. We also have the accessibility gap in research. And this is a challenge in marketing research accessibility where surveys often exclude individuals with disabilities. Many times it happens due to poorly designed interfaces that create barriers. If the interface is poorly designed, then an individual can't go through the survey process. So we've already, unfortunately, eliminated them from being part of the sample. We also have research tools that are not always compatible with assistive technologies. We're going to get into assistive technology soon. Screen readers are one of the more popular ones that we're going to really be focusing on. And sometimes the research tools are not compatible with screen readers.
So exclusion is a reality we just can't overlook. Despite the progress we've made as a society in reducing stigma, survey technology can leave individuals with disabilities feeling very isolated. There are a couple of main reasons for this. One is the social model versus the medical model. So the social model would say our society needs a redesign. The surveys need to include everyone. The technology needs to work for everyone. But many people still live under the medical model where disability is an individual's problem or an individual family problem. And state and local laws are shifting toward inclusive design, but society still often views disability as an individual burden. There's also a real fear of disclosure. So people know, but when they've identified themselves as disabled in the past, they've experienced discrimination in jobs and housing, which are huge milestones for people. So that even at a smaller milestone, like participating in a survey, people are reluctant to show their disability unless they really have to. There's also survey abandonment. So barriers in technology can create frustration. It'll lead to a dropped response and lost insights. And the worst part is that even, the dropped response is never really caught on the research side because nobody pressed that final submit button. They just left mid-survey. And when that happens, no one knows that anything is wrong. I'm pretty sure that if you are attending this summer camp presentation, 99% of you may know what a screen reader is, but just for the 1% who never encountered it, I'm just going to do a little level setting. A screen reader is a piece of software that reads digital content aloud for users who are blind or have low vision. And it can also be helpful for individuals with learning or cognitive disabilities. It also works on a braille display, so if you're not listening, if you're deafblind, then you can also experience the screen reader. But in order for a screen reader to work properly, it relies on properly structured content to work effectively. So what we mean by that is content with headings, labeled buttons, links that make sense. All these things are critical when someone is using a screen reader. So we've tested a couple of different market research questionnaires on screen readers and created some videos. And we're going to insert these videos into the presentation so you can hear the experience of navigating specific types of survey questions with a screen reader. I will say there are some question types that automatically work really well, so we're not going to spend time on videoing those. Those are question types like multiple choice, check boxes, or text responses where you have to type in the answer. A quick note, text responses may be a challenge for people with cognitive disabilities, but in general, as far as the screen reader accessibility goes, they work pretty well. So all those things have been made accessible over time, with trial and error, and just figuring it all out. So we are making progress. But we're going to go through a couple of question types that are a little more interesting.
And if I may jump in, we have slowed down the screen reader so that it'll be more easily understood by those of us who do not have the superpowers that Kristin has.
Right. I don't have superpowers, but I'm very used to the screen reader. But for this video, we did slow it down. So for those of you who are screen reader users, I swear, use it faster.
Huh.
Okay. Our first video is going to be Likert scale.
Heading Level 3. How familiar are you with digital accessibility guidelines? Left paren e.g. WCAG right paren, left paren Likert scale right paren star. Groups very unfamiliar. 1. 1 radio button not checked. 2. 2 radio button not checked. 3. 3 radio button not checked. 4. 4 radio button not checked. 5. 5 radio button not checked. Very familiar. 4 radio button not enter. 4 radio button.
So one thing I want you to notice about this video of the Likert scale is, in general, it's very usable. It's one of the more usable types. It's pretty similar to multiple choice, actually, in the way that it presents itself. But if you listened, you could hear the labels on only some of the answers, the top and the bottom. So it's an accessible question, technically, and we're very happy about that. But it would be really wonderful if the Likert scale question had labels on those 3 middle options. It would just make everything clearer and easier for anyone to fill out correctly, and it would make better research in the end.
And if I may jump in, Kristin, I have found that that's a universal design benefit because I am now designing all of my rating scale questions with labeled metrics across the board. So even if it's a 5-point scale or a 10 or 11-point scale, I'm making sure that every metric on the scale is labeled. And I've noticed that people are now more likely to respond accurately when using points on the scale that are not what I call the anchor points, the extreme on each side of the scale.
Right. Our society loves to live in extremes, but we need to learn more about the middle, right?
Absolutely. Well said.
All right, our next video is about slider with autoplay.
Link continue right double enter. Survey.
Just this.
You look like the Pringles guy.
No, I don't.
Posted.
Chris Pratt is giving Mr. P.
Identical.
Senor Pringles.
Chris, I have the role of a lifetime for you.
Do I get a cut?
Survey 6. Please watch this short video. While it is playing, move the slider to indicate when you are feeling less entertained or more entertained. Heading level 1. Heading link less entertain link unavailable 51. Less entertaining. More entertaining. Left double angle bracket back button.
So, if you could hear that, sorry about that, everyone. I cringe every time I hear this video. Because it's a really complicated experience. First of all, autoplay itself is not a very user-friendly experience for someone with a screen reader. If you can't find the play button to get started and the question just loads and starts for you, it can be really alienating. It was also, in this case, louder than the screen reader, and I couldn't hear it. So if I were to go back and even attempt to do that question, I would have had to like raise my volume of one thing and lower volume of the other thing. But if I didn't have time to do that, that would have been a really compelling case for me for survey abandonment. But then you get into the question itself, where it asks you to figure out when you're more entertained and when you're less entertained and slide it at the right point. But the problem is that if there's a timing to that response, and there is, because it's very quick, the whole question is fast because it's trying to get people to react to their feelings about something in the moment, but it backfires for people with disabilities who need extra time to interact with the technology, who can't pause it to check off, okay, at this point it works for me, at this point it doesn't. And it just keeps going. The slider doesn't even work. You can't even find it. It was a really, really frustrating experience. And I hope that people who develop these research platforms will figure out a better way to address this in the future, because I do understand the point of these types of questions. All right, our next question type is paired comparisons.
Survey 62, heading level 1. Please express your preference between these pairs below. Summary: this table contains form elements to answer the survey question. Table with 5 columns and 4 blank. Strongly prefer. No preference. Strongly prefer. 240,207. Pepsi. Pepsi. Coca-Cola. Strongly prefer. Radio button not checked. Pepsi. Coca-Cola. No preference. Radio button not checked. Pepsi. Coca-Cola. Strongly prefer. 240,207/Q4 underline Coca-Cola can graphic. Coca-Cola. 240,207/Q4 underline Ford graphic. Ford. Ford Chevrolet. Strongly prefer. Radio button not checked. Ford Chevrolet. No preference. Radio button not checked. Ford Chevrolet. Strongly prefer. Radio button not checked. 240,207/Q4 underline Chevrolet graphic. Chevrolet. 240,207/Q4 underline KFC graphic. KFC. KFC. McDonald's. Strongly prefer. Radio. KFC. McDonald's. No prefer. KFC. McDonald's. Strongly prefer. 240,207/Q4 underline McDonald's graphic. McDonald's. Table end.
Alright, so this is the type of question that I think many people would assume is not ever going to be accessible. I think it could be if it was redesigned just a little bit. For instance, if there were checkboxes near each of the comparisons, so you could check off the right one. Also, if there was really good alt text. Alt text is text that describes the graphics. So, in these comparisons, the logos were not renamed to say, the specific logo that we're trying to compare. So it made it really confusing. But in this case, I think just a couple of redesign tweaks could really make it doable for people.
And that's really important, because I'm so glad, Kristin, we covered paired comparisons, because it's a methodology that can be applied to many different types of marketing research situations. For those that are marketing researchers out there, I'm going to get a little bit technical now. There's methodologies such as MaxDiff, where we really try to model trade-off analysis, and paired comparisons are a very effective way of doing that. So it's nice to know that we can now make those types of more complex models accessible.
All right, our next question type is multiple choice grid.
Heading required edit. Heading level 3. Rate the following barriers to digital accessibility in your organization on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not a barrier and 5 is major barrier: left per and Likert. Heading level 3 scale. Heading level 3 star. Not a barrier, minor barrier, somewhat of a barrier, often a major barrier, major barrier. Groups: lack of knowledge or training. Not a barrier. Response: for lack of knowledge or training. Radio button not checked, required. Rate the following. Enter. List of limited budget / resources. Group: required. This minor barrier, somewhat of a barrier, often a major barrier. Response: for limited space. Limited budget / resources. Group: required. This question requires 1 response per row, often a major barrier. Response: for limited budget / resources. Radio button check. Lack of executive support. Group: required. This not a barrier. Space. Escape. Not a barrier. Response: for lack of executive support. Radio button check. Off made. Group and lack of group start. Technical complexity. Not a minor barrier. Response. Space. Rate the following. Somewhat minor barrier. Response: for technical complexity. Radio button check.
So this presentation is not all doom and gloom. I'm here to say that. And multiple choice grid is one of those examples. It is one where people have asked me if it's accessible, or they've asked it in such a way that kind of dismissed it. Like, oh, I guess I can't use multiple choice grid, right? And my answer is no, you absolutely can use multiple choice grid. The reason for that is really clear labeling on all of the options. And, it does take a little bit of getting used to. So I think people with a little bit less comfort with technology might take a little while to adjust to multiple choice grid, but it is a really nice way to get a lot of information in a little bit less space, and people with disabilities can embrace that. And people who use a screen reader, once they learn how multiple choice grid works, hear all the rows, all the columns, they know where they are in the rows and columns, and they just have at it.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you pointed out the fact that sometimes there are certain questions that we assume may not be accessible that really can be accessible and don't really need much work done to them. So it's really important to, if one has questions, to make sure you engage folks that have expertise in the area, because you might be pleasantly surprised that some of the questions that you think are inaccessible are accessible, and some that you think are accessible may not be.
That's very true. It's always good to test and then release something to a broader audience. Find somebody with a disability, even in your community, or an expert or someone who tests these things as a job, because they can give you a lot of great insight.
We're available.
Yes, we are. And the final question type I'm going to go over today is ranking.
Survey 62. Heading level 1. Please rank your top 3 takeout places. List of 5 items. 240,207/Q5 underline McDonald's graphic. 240,207/Q5 underline Domino's graphic. 240,207/Q5 underline Starbucks graphic. 240,207/Q5 underline Pizza Hut graphic. 240,207/Q5 underline Papa John's graphic. List and list of 3 items. 1, 2, 3. List and list of 3 items. Rank 1. Rank 2. Rank 3. List and left double angle bracket.
So ranking takes a little bit of what I said about paired comparisons and a little bit of what I said from multiple choice grid. It is one of those that, again, people come to me and they're like, oh, I guess we can't rank. Ranking is, if we had more ranking, our society would be a much better place in general. But for a survey for this presentation, ranking questions in this particular video were inaccessible. The labeling was poor. There was no way to check off things and remove things. But I have, in a very brief time on a political committee, used a ranking system where there were checkboxes. So you could actually check off your number 1, number 2, number 3, and then it would actually show up on the bottom, 1, 2, and 3, ranked in the order you wanted them, and there'd be a little remove button next to them. So, say I made a mistake, I'm like, oh no, wait, I want to switch 2 and 3. Well, I could remove number 2 and remove number 3, and then put them back in the order that I want them in. So, it is doable. It takes more time, but it's so worth it, and I really hope ranking questions take off in a lot more platforms.
And again, this is a universal design benefit that will have value for everybody that participates. So you're really tightening up your questions in your survey process by implementing the suggestions that Kristin just mentioned, because it's going to benefit everyone who's interviewed.
So let's recap some of the overarching findings of these videos. First of all, unlabeled buttons. Seriously, they're the bane of my existence. They occur everywhere. Sometimes they are unnecessary. I don't really need them. Other times they're kind of annoying, but I can figure out what they mean, as in that one survey question. And sometimes they literally stop my work. I can't do anything. So it really depends on the context of unlabeled buttons. But unlabeled button, or it's like unlabeled 0 button, unlabeled 1 button, something like that. Really, the more you can label, the better. Screen readers just can't interpret unlabeled buttons. The next thing is just poor navigation. Lack of headings really disrupts that logical reading order we need, and the inaccessible question formats. So it's really important. Also, inaccessible navigation can come in the form of sliders, drag and drop, which is getting better, but still needs some work. Complex grids, if they don't have labels, can be a problem. Drop-down menus with missing labels and required fields without screen reader prompts can make filling out questions really difficult. Also, timed responses like that autoplay that don't allow enough time for assistive tech users to catch up with the question is really a problem. So here are some really important best practices that we can use when we're thinking about survey questions. Use really simple, clear language to design your questions. Make sure that you understand when you go back over your questions what you're asking your participants to do. Try to find someone who's never experienced your survey before to read the questions and make sure they understand. Ensure proper labeling for form fields and buttons and headings and other important structural elements. Provide alternatives to drag and drop or slider questions. Enable keyboard navigation. And test surveys with screen readers before launch. We are big fans of test, test, test. People like to rush things out and automate things, and so testing has really dropped in use, and we are strong advocates for bringing it back because one test can save you a lot of bad data. And I'll turn it back over to Steve.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to sound a bit redundant, but these are universal design improvements. I mean, think about this. Using simple, clear language, that benefits everybody. Ensuring that we're labeling buttons well, again, benefits everyone. Making sure that people can use keyboard navigation. There are some folks who prefer the keyboard to the mouse or to the trackpad. So again, it's a universal benefit. And as Kristin said, test, test, test. Now on the recruitment side, there's also some strategies that we can implement. Reevaluate your criteria for screening, because what may happen is you'll notice some unintentional folks are being excluded, maybe by the language that you're using in the screener. So you want to make sure that you are conscious of that and improve on that language. It's okay to be direct with folks. Ask about assistive technology users in the screener. And so when you're screening people, you can just ask them right up front, do you use assistive technology, yes or no? And again, it'll give them the ability to route to a section of the questions where maybe you've included things that are a little bit more screen reader friendly so that they can go through the process in a more seamless way. You can also offer accommodations proactively. No one will be offended by that. In fact, people will embrace that. And finally, ensure that your surveys work on various devices and assistive tools. Just like with computers, some people might be going through the process on a tablet, on an iPad, on a smartphone, on a Windows computer, on a Macintosh, or on a Mac. The same way, there are various devices and assistive tools that are out there. And so you want to make sure that you test. Some might be using JAWS, some might be using an alternative. So again, just test all these alternative devices. So some simple changes that will make a big impact right away for you. And Kristin mentioned the first one, which is alt text for images. Again, just to recap, it's just a description so that when somebody comes across an image, they know what that image entails. Sometimes it may be a decorative image, so it's not important, but more times than not, it's an image that is pertinent to the survey process. So a brief description. There's a lot of art with your alt text descriptions. Sometimes more is not better. So you want it to be meaningful, but you also don't want it to be too much in depth. Also, you want to ensure that high color contrast is being leveraged for readability. Again, this will benefit many people because we have folks that might be colorblind that could benefit from that. Avoid jargon and overly complex sentence structures. Again, another universal benefit design improvement. And finally, provide captions and transcripts for all your multimedia content. And we find that many people today like captions and transcripts regardless of their needs and requirements. So it's just a good practice to start including on all of your surveys when you have multimedia. So we have a call to action for those that are going to conduct marketing research. And it's not based solely on legal requirements, although that's important. But we also want to drive home the fact that it will serve as a business advantage. I mean, think about this. If you're on the client side and you have a competitor and you're including, I'll call it accessible questions, and they are not, and you have accessible design baked into your survey process, you're going to be including part of that $1.9 trillion market that they're leaving out. So huge business advantage. Second, it also goes back to something I know I've been saying over and over again about universal design principles. So from a usability perspective, it will just be better for everybody. So as far as some next steps, evaluate your current research methods, implement accessibility best practices that we've gone over, and commit to ongoing learning and improvement because, as we've all discovered, it's an evolution. You're not going to have it all solved on your first survey that you've made accessible because there's always going to be new things you can do to improve your survey process. Just to tell you a little bit about us, the CHACS accessibility team, there's a QR code there if you'd like to reach out to us directly. We're certified, and we've got over 70 team members in 16 states. We have 17 IAAP certifications on our team. And as far as frontline accessibility team members, we have 6 accessibility coaches, 12 digital document experts. We have 7 technology and QA consultants, and we even have vetted offshore partners. So again, if you've got even just a simple question, feel free to reach out to us. We always love to engage to help people try to get on the road to making things more accessible. And thank you very much for listening today and taking part in our presentation. We're excited to partner on solutions to meet your needs or even your partner's needs. We look forward to transferring any knowledge we have to your teams. We do a lot of training, so we just don't go in and remediate and solve problems, but we also train people so that they can solve their own issues. And our approach is very flexible, adaptable. It's a cost-effective, and I think you'll even find it enjoyable. And we like to say we Chaxify things.
Right. We make it human. Thank you, everyone, for attending our presentation and for, learning more about research. We really appreciate it. Every ally who works harder and harder to make everything accessible is a little step in the right direction. We believe in progress over perfection at Shack's Training and Consulting. So, maybe you just made one question a little bit clearer, added a description. You didn't solve the whole world in one fell swoop, but you just made a little step in the right direction. That's wonderful. And if you reach out to us, we can help you to achieve that even more.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, as a marketing research professional, it's really great to see that folks doing survey work and focus groups are moving in this direction. And there's never a bad question, so feel free to follow up. We'd love to engage and further our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.